Montessori education, a quiet revolution in learning and lasting educational reform. For much of the 19th and early 20th centuries, education was a rigid and uniform enterprise. Classrooms were places of order and discipline, where memorization and repetition were valued over creativity or curiosity. Teachers were authorities to be obeyed, and children were expected to be passive vessels for knowledge, absorbing lessons without question. Emotional, social, and physical development were largely ignored, and students who did not conform to the narrow mold were often labeled as failures. It was in this environment, constrained, closed-minded, and hostile, that was dreadful for children with shorter attention spans and busy bodies. Then, a revolution began to shape. Maria Montessori, an Italian physician and educator, introduced a radically different version of learning. One that centered on the child, valued independence and curiosity, and sought to nurture human potential rather than merely enforce obedience. Montessori education, developed in the early 1900s, challenged the very principles that had long guided schools. What began as a small experiment in a poor neighborhood of Rome has grown into a global education movement. Montessori's work demonstrates a recurring pattern in human history. Innovation is born. It encounters resistance, and over time it can inspire and later cause reform. Her ideas did not just change schools. They changed how society understands learning itself. At the turn of the 20th century, the standard model of schooling was strictly authoritarian. Students sat in rows, often silently listening to lectures and memorizing facts dictated by the teacher. Creativity was insignificant, and curiosity was secondary. Discipline was enforced through strict rules, and in some cases, physical punishment. The main principle was that children learned best through repetition and control. Children with disabilities were frequently excluded altogether, and those who struggled academically were seen as inherently bad. Intelligence was viewed as a fixed trait rather than something that can develop over supportive conditions. The result was a system that preferred compliance over understanding and traditionalism over individuality. It was in this rigid educational landscape that Maria Montessori's revolutionary ideas emerged. Her approach questioned not just methods, but the very assumptions about what it means to be a child and how humans learn. Maria Montessori was born in 1870 in Chiavari, Italy. She became one of the first female physicians in the country, which was a remarkable achievement at the time when women were largely excluded from higher education. Her medical training profoundly shaped her approach to education, blending observation and a respect for individual development. While working with children deemed uneducable in psychiatric institutions, Montessori observed something extraordinary. When children were given carefully designed materials and the freedom to explore, they thrived. They concentrated deeply, demonstrated self-discipline, and took joy in learning, which were qualities that traditional schools had assumed were absent in these children. Montessori concluded that the fault was not the child, but the system itself. In 1907, she opened up the first Casa dei Bambini, or Children's House, in a poor district of Rome. There, she implemented an environment tailored to the child, low shelves with materials within reach, child-sized furniture, and activities that encouraged hands-on exploration. Teachers became guides, observing children, supporting their interests, and providing opportunities rather than issuing directions. The results were striking. Children previously considered incapable of learning demonstrated remarkable intellectual and emotional growth. Montessori's model challenged the assumption that education must be punctual, instead demonstrating that respect, freedom, and engagement could produce both joy and mastery. At the heart of Montessori education is the belief that children learn best when they're actively engaged and empowered to explore at their own pace. Montessori classrooms are carefully prepared ecosystems where the materials are not just tools, but invitations to discovery. Each object, whether a block, a sandpaper letter, or a puzzle, is designed to teach a specific concept through hands-on education. Mixed-age classrooms are another hallmark of Montessori education. Children spanning 3-year age ranges learn side by side. Younger students gain from observing and imitating older peers, while older children reinforce their understanding by mentoring those younger than themselves. This creates a culture of cooperation and community rather than competition and hierarchy. Independence is cultivated from the start. Children choose their work, move freely, and are encouraged to solve problems on their own. Mistakes are reframed as natural steps in learning, rather than failures to be punished. Such principles stand in stark contrast to traditional methods, which prioritize uniformity and teacher control over anything else. Montessori education also places a strong emphasis on respect, not just for the child, but for the community and environment. Children learn responsibility through meaningful work and develop self-confidence alongside social awareness. There were fears that giving children freedom would lead to disorder and undermine the authority of teachers. In the US, Montessori schools gained popularity in the 1910s, but declined during the 1920s because of inconsistent teacher training and the rise of progressive education movements. A lot of Montessori schools later closed because Montessori refused to align her education with fascist ideology. Her experience highlighted a fundamental tension. Revolutionary ideas in education often clash with authoritarian systems that demand conformity. Despite these challenges, Montessori education then began to thrive. After World War II, it began to spread internationally, finding ground in Europe, India, and eventually the United States. Educators, parents, and researchers rediscovered Montessori's writings, recognizing their relevance to a world seeking alternatives to rigid schooling. In the late 20th century, research in child development and neuroscience began to support many Montessori principles. Studies confirmed that hands-on learning and self-directed activity could significantly emphasize cognitive and emotional and social development. Today, thousands of Montessori schools operate worldwide, serving children from infancy to adolescence. And while not universally adopted, Montessori principles have influenced the modern reforms such as project-based learning. Montessori education represents a profound departure from traditional schooling. With the child at the center, Maria Montessori challenged the thoughts about authority, intelligence, and discipline. Her approach inspired lasting reform and reshaped educational practices around the globe. The history of Montessori education is a story of patience, persistence, and transformative power of ideas. Montessori's legacy reminds us that education is not merely about instruction. It is about nurturing curiosity and independence.